This hallway used to be one of those forgettable, boring spaces that you just walk through. But after a little wallpaper, a not so little ceiling hiccup, and one ribbon border later, it finally feels like it fits in the rest of my house. So a year ago, I reached out to Wallpaper Direct asking if they would be interested in doing a collaboration with me for wallpaper in the upstairs hallway. At that time, it didn't end up working out, no big deal, but then a couple of weeks ago, Wallpaper Direct reached back out to me and asked if I was still interested in doing a little collaboration, and I said, of course. So I had my eye on a GP&J Baker print. They ended up sending me 4 rolls of it. It's really good. This pattern is called Tilly, and it's in the aqua colorway, and this aqua picks up the aqua here in the dining room wallpaper, and so it's the dining room and then the kitchen and then this hallway where this is going to go. I think it's going to tie the spaces in just perfectly. You know, this is a really loud and busy print, and then this one's going to just be the 2 colors, very small, tiny print. It's just going to like really unify both of the spaces together, and I can't wait to get it up, so stay tuned. One thing before we really get going, I began this project in early 2024, which has almost been 2 years ago, and for whatever reason, I unfortunately didn't video it in landscape mode, so most of my video has been taken vertically, and I know that that does not create the best user experience here on YouTube. So I did the best I could to enlarge what clips I could so that you can see exactly what it is I'm doing, and that's why the size of the video will kind of be all over the place. No one's more annoyed than me, I can promise you that. First things first, the drywall here was brand new with only 1 coat of primer on it, and one should never ever wallpaper over new or raw drywall that has not been painted. And I'm sure we all have a nightmare wallpaper removal trauma, and that is because somebody decided to apply wallpaper directly onto unprepped walls. And if you wallpaper onto raw drywall, or in this instance drywall that just has 1 coat of primer on it, you have sealed your fate, and that wallpaper has now become one with the wallboard, and it will ruin the walls when you or someone in the future tries to remove it. I chose a paint color that matched the lightest shade in the ground of my wallpaper and painted 2 coats on my walls first. Then, to really be an overachiever, I decided to size my walls too. Now, this step is optional if your walls are already painted, but I always like to take the extra time and really do it well because I know I will want to remove this paper someday, and I, like everybody else, have several wallpaper removal nightmares that I do not wish to repeat. Sizing creates a barrier between the paste and your walls that prohibits the paste from penetrating the wallboard. It's also supposed to promote adhesion and allows you to more easily move the paper when you're adjusting it and matching the pattern. "89 inches, so I'm going to cut my pieces at 91. So I've got my laser level set up. It's kind of hard to see, but I wanted to show you how I have the laser right exactly in the corner at the top, and then see how it comes over to this wall. I mean, that's just how out of square my walls are, and that's why you never start wallpaper just butting it into a corner. My wallpaper is 27 inches wide. I'm not going to measure from the corner over 27 inches. I'm going to do it 25. So I'm going to measure over from the corner over 25 inches and make a mark. And then I'm going to set my laser level up so that my level line meets that 25-inch mark. So whenever I put the paper on, 2 inches is going to be over here on this wall. And we'll deal with that later. All right, so I have my self-leveling laser set up at my 25-inch mark. And I'm going to make sure that the edge of my wallpaper follows this line all the way down. Of course, that means this side over here, whatever paper comes over on this corner is not going to be level, but we're going to worry about that later. Level line for our paper to go this way to wrap around the room. I set my tape measure on the dining table so that I could roll the paper out to cut. Of course, you've got to be sure to allow some waste at the top and the bottom, and always remember to measure twice, cut once. This paper was a straight match, and that means that the design aligns horizontally across each strip. The pattern from left to right on one strip will match that of the next one and continue in the same manner. So if you're interested in knowing a bit more about the different types of pattern matching, I've added a link in the description to wallpapershop.co.uk that I found pretty helpful. If I was a bit more confident, I could have laid out and cut all of my strips at one time since it's a straight match. In theory, it is pretty straightforward and simple. However, I could not bring myself to do it that way. I just cut each strip one at a time as I needed it by taking the roll to the wall and matching the pattern first, just to be sure. Let's get our paste ready. I'll link it here. I'm using Sure Grip Universal Wall Covering Adhesive. I've already got it stirred. The wallpaper I'm using is a paste the wall application. And I know that because that's what the instructions on the inside of the label tell me. You need to follow the instructions of what the paper says. There's several different ways that you can apply it. You can paste the back of the paper. Some papers are pre-pasted. You paste the wall. So whatever application the paper says to do is what you need to do. In the instructions, it usually tells you what paste is recommended as well. So follow the instructions of your paper and you should be okay. So, you can see along the edge. And into the corner, we've got an inch of paper to overlap and, finish over there. You don't want to get too far ahead of yourself with the paste, so just paste each sheet as you come to it. If you get too far ahead, it's just going to dry on the wall before you can get there. It takes a little bit of time to get your paper on the wall and situated where you want it to go. You just can't do that before the paste would dry out, so just paste as you go. is, since I don't have very much of this paper on this edge to make sure that I'm lined up top to bottom, what I'm gonna do is hold up a piece of scrap and make a mark where that ends. And then I'm gonna line my laser up with this mark over here. That way I can ensure that I'm straight all the way down. New paste, better paste. I don't know what the heck I was using. It was a mess. Instantly, I can tell that this glue is better. I'm able to like move it around on the wall. The other stuff, like I couldn't even, I don't know, it was too thin. Had no tack. Okay, so what I'm gonna do here in this little corner, I don't want to put an entire piece that's gonna reach from here and over to the corner. I'm gonna measure the distance from the edge of the paper to the corner, and then I'm going to cut a strip that is 1 inch larger than that measurement. So I'm going to put it on. It's gonna overlap on this wall about 1 inch, and then the piece that I cut off, I'm going to like line it up. It's not gonna be a perfect match. But come on, give me a break. Look at this tiny little print. Nobody's ever gonna see that it's not a perfect match. Because I got a window to cut around too. It's gonna be fun. Okay, so I measured, it's 1.5 inches from the edge of my paper to the corner. So I'm just gonna cut a 2 inch piece to start with, okay? I put a block of wood underneath here, just a piece of scrap so that I'm not razoring on my table, obviously. Okay, let's go stick this on the wall.
You know, I don't know if this is the way a seasoned professional paper hanger would have done this cut, but it worked out well. I have put the paper on the wall and cut the relief in the corner before, but with this paper, it was really thick. It just wasn't relaxed at all. It was very hard to work with, so I felt like cutting it on the table was the best way to do it. And here's the overlapped corner. I'm telling you, you can't see it. It looks fine. Good enough for me, I say. anytime you're wallpapering, it is imperative that you keep your razor blade very, very sharp. With the blades that I use, it's got a bunch of segments in it, and I basically will snap off the tip after just almost every cut, maybe every 2 cuts. I'll snap the tip off that blade so I always have a fresh one, because if not, you're gonna tear your paper. It's gonna be super frustrating, so don't feel like you're wasting blades whenever you're doing this. You gotta keep them snapped off and keep that blade fresh. And here's how the room looked after. I love the paper so much. It was just what this boring passageway needed. It brought in the aqua color from the dining room, and it added a subtle visual texture that I love. And it stayed looking this way for a whole year. My motto is never let well enough alone, so I have been loving rooms with this small little ribbon border around the trim, and I thought the hallway was a perfect space to add this cutie little detail. So I found this really pretty ribbon on Etsy that matches my cabinet paint color, and boom, I got a new project. This is such a simple DIY project that adds so much charm for not a lot of money. I'm using fabric glue and a small paintbrush to glue this Petersham ribbon along all of the molding in the room. Fun fact, did you even know that there was such a thing as Petersham ribbon? Because I did not. I bought this ribbon thinking it was grosgrain, and when I shared it on my Instagram stories calling it grosgrain ribbon, someone informed me that it was actually Petersham. And I've linked this exact ribbon that I'm using in the description, and the Etsy store has some really amazing, beautiful ribbons in beautiful colors and lots of stripe, so you should check them out. Side note, if you do this project, do a test before beginning. I applied glue to a scrap to make sure that it didn't affect the front side in any way. Anytime I'm doing a DIY project in my home, I try my best to execute them with the highest level of care and attention to detail as I can, because the last thing I want is for my home to scream, "Hey, I'm not a professional at this." And so as it relates to gluing ribbon around your trim, I think that the corners are an area that can go wonky and scream poor DIY project. So I really took my time on the corners to make them as perfect and crispy as I could. I used a metal ruler as a guide and a sharp razor to cut the ribbon precisely, and then glued them closed, being really careful not to get the glue on the face of the ribbon. I told you I can never let well enough alone. So this is the point where I could have just added ribbon along the ceiling and been finished, but I was like, you know what this room really needs is wallpaper on the ceiling. I remembered that I had a partial roll of wallpaper left over from when I papered the walls a year earlier, but did I stop to measure it all before I started? No, like why would I be responsible like that? I just full steam ahead, I started papering the ceiling, and I ran out of paper halfway through. So I ordered another roll of paper, knowing deep down in my gut that likely wasn't going to work out. It's probably a well-known fact that colors can vary between dye lots, and that's why it's really important to be sure to order enough paper to complete your whole project so that you're not having to go back and order more paper later and risking that the dye lots will have changed. And while companies do their best to ensure colors remain the same, it's just a fact of life that they don't. 4 weeks later, my new roll of paper arrived, and I was hoping that some miracle would happen and that it would be a perfect match. Remember, a year had passed between the walls being papered and then the ceiling being papered. Well. Welcome to my life. I do this kind of crap to myself all the time. Like, I don't
purposely set out to try to make my life harder, but it happens constantly. I don't know. It's just, I am who I am. So the only way I know how to fix this is I'm gonna keep this sheet on. I'm gonna have to tear these sheets off. Should have enough in the new wallpaper roll that I can just wallpaper the rest of the ceiling with this new roll. This might get confusing, but let me explain. I only had to remove the 3 panels of paper that I had installed that was left over from the first batch of wallpaper. I was able to leave up the 1 new sheet of paper from the new roll that I applied, and then I just needed to add new paper to the left of it and to the right of it. Hopefully that makes sense, but this was the only way to fix the issue, is by removing the sheets that didn't match. And I was very lucky that the ceiling only required that 1 roll of new paper, because had it not been enough, I just would have lost my mind. Anyway, I'm very happy to report that there was only 1 tiny spot in the ceiling where the sheetrock was damaged whenever I took the paper down. So after that huge, awful debacle, the ceiling was successfully papered and I finished gluing the ribbon around the ceiling. This room has a vent in the ceiling, so I decided to cover it with wallpaper. It's my first time to ever do such a thing, but it was pretty simple. Just sprayed the vent with spray adhesive and then stuck the paper to it, cut it around it with an X-Acto knife, and then I was just able to take my fingers and like feel around where the voids were, and once you stick your razor blade into that, it will follow the lines of the metal. The last thing I wanted to do in my room is to change out all of my switches to these brass ones from Resident Supply. I have a code for 10% off. You can find that link in the description. This is not a tutorial on how to change those because I do not feel good enough to teach you how to do that. But there are lots of YouTube videos out there that can tell you how to change one of these, but it scares me to death every time, to be honest with you. Love to add small details into my home that, you know, even though this room doesn't serve a main function as it's just a pass-through area, adding charming elements like a wallpapered ceiling, the ribbon border, wallpapered vent cover, upgrading the switch covers, like it makes what could easily be just a forgotten and neglected space feel really elevated and intentional. At what's coming up next. I'm attempting to create the most real looking faux fireplace in my living room. I'm repairing and repainting this mantle that I found on Facebook Marketplace, hoping it doesn't look silly in the end, and I'll finally be able to tackle the powder room that's been an empty box for 2.5 years. Of course, it will include more wallpaper, a fun trim color, and a gorgeous sink skirt to dress up an antique pedestal sink that I scored again on Facebook Marketplace. I hope that you'll come back to join me.